Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. A quick show of hands. How many people here are from a game developer or a game publisher? Wonderful. And the rest are from service providers, other agencies, investors? Yeah? Okay. How many of you, those that are working within the game developer community and publishing community, have either experienced within their community or indeed potentially personally? There's not that many women at all here, which is a shame, because actually that's what we see as being a major issue. Have experienced some sort of toxic behavior within their games. Okay, hopefully we can find a way to maybe change that. Okay, I think the approach, however, is that we fundamentally believe that the context of that speech and text is absolutely vital to the understanding and to the improvement of the lives and of the gamers within your community. And it's only when you look at the context of this text and the speech you truly get the meaning of what people are saying to each other. It's not necessarily my role to scaremonger or use fear as a way to drive change, but we all must accept and be aware of the dark side of the internet. And any quick search surfaces a sea of articles and upsetting news stories. And the nature of the activity that we're seeing is changing almost daily. And the reality is that online communities are continually being infiltrated by trolls, abusive content, and spam. For most gamers, they are, however, positive. They're friendly and respectful. And the community managers that we talk to generally acknowledge that it's about 1 to 1.5% of any given community that actually contribute to more than 90% of the headlines. But the trouble they cause and the knock-on effects on the game can have a much larger impact. What's happening now seems to be growing, and the challenge feels like it's getting bigger and unfortunately more widespread. And the variety and the nature of the trolling and the abuse is constantly morphing in terms of the type and sophistication. Right now, these behaviors are coming out of the darkness for all of us to see. Many of us are finding that the sheer scale and ever-changing nature of the challenge is becoming increasingly difficult and time-consuming to manage, and we need to be able to do something about it. I feel that actually we have a moral responsibility to the most important people, our players, our gamers, who must trust us that we will keep them safe and secure. And let's not forget, it also affects our brands, our reputations, and our future business success. And it's unfair that so few people can cause so much damage to the games you've created and to the players you spent loads of time and effort cultivating. However, when we've approached a lot of the management at game developers that I've known well over the last 10 years, the initial reaction can be one of those three guys in the picture. I don't know why. Maybe it's not seen as a priority. Maybe it's not one that developers feel comfortable talking about with a third party. Maybe they feel the issue is sometimes a little bit too big to deal with. Who knows? But these are a smattering of the reactions that we've heard. Even though I am certain that everybody here is moderating the communities of their loved gamers in some way, whether it's humans, whether it's technology, or a little bit of both. But just because you're not always seeing reports of toxicity, are you sure this is the reality? It's similar to other forms of abuse, where many instances are not played out or revealed in the open, and we're here to look under the lid. Donald Rumsfeld famously said this quote a few years ago, and I actually find the bit relating to the unknown unknowns some of the most relevant. And we must acknowledge, a lot of things going on in our communities, and we don't know about them, but we don't even know what the issue is in the first place. and trying to do our utmost to ensure that we're fully aware of what our communities are doing is, I think, imperative. Recent research between Telefonica, Qatar Research Institute, and the University of Washington, they produced a report called Exploring Cyberbullying and Other Toxic Behavior in Team Competition Online Games. They did specifically look at League of Legends, and that isn't necessarily replicated across all games. But what they found when they analyzed a data set of over 10 million player reports that originated from 1.46 million toxic players on League of Legends, they found that some of the most extreme cases, that only 12% of reports were 12% were actually made. That's 1 in 9. There were some best cases, 2 in 4, but it can get as bad as 1 in 9. So that means that 88% of toxic occurrences are not being reported. What, however, we aren't very much aware of is the implications of toxicity are far-reaching. Cyberbullying is associated with depression, anxiety, and has been shown to result in self-harm in several well-publicized cases. And with the amount of time and energy players invest into games, victims are likely to feel emotional effects that persist into the real world. So it's clear that moderation of some kind is an absolute must. But my strong belief is that right now, neither humans nor computers alone are sufficient to root out and deal with the systemic problems. And with the fraudsters themselves now using sophisticated AI to defraud and spam us, we must be on the front foot, meeting fire with fire and playing our most sophisticated hand right back at them. Moderation tools are developing at speed, but many remain fairly imprecise and blunt, mainly involving keyword searches. They don't reflect the dynamic shifts and the changes of hate speech, for example, or have the world knowledge essential to understanding it. Trolls and bots have also become very savvy at getting past the current filters, deliberately misspelling words or phrases, so keyword algorithms can be easily tricked. And remember that when it comes to some of this competition, you're up against a 12-year-old adolescent with a huge imagination, extremely creative, and has just learnt Unicode. But what's more, current technology rarely looks at the entire conversation, at the history of the conversation, at context of chat or people's emotions and reactions. So my belief is that we need highly sophisticated combination of AI, machine learning, and natural language processing working together to deal with these issues. We need technology that doesn't just look at the individual situations and flag right now instances of problems. We need to see the context, the whole story, and the history. And we need solutions that can look at people's reactions and sometimes non-reactions to work out what's going on. So the important thing is here, we need solutions that watch and learn and that fully understand the whole story, the community norms, the entire context, and only then highlight situations that help the community managers really take action when necessary. I'll give you 3 examples. First, let's look at swearing and bad language. In a kid's game, it's not okay and needs dealing with. But many adult communities have lots of swearing, and that's fine, as long as it's with the people who are swearing back at each other. We don't always need to raise alerts around the swearing itself. And if you ban in-game words, then you also risk disturbing the regular chat. So in the end, you just annoy regular gamers while not really preventing very much. Plus, the game type also changes the violence of the language, so the community norms must also be taken into account. But here's an example of chat within an online game. There are multiple players that can all hear or see the same chat, and are all talking at the same time. A human moderator may watch this chat, but it may be too complex or happening too fast to notice some of the nuance. So taking a lens to it, we see that one player has complained about somebody swearing. We can now look back in time at which other players were involved and that were saying. But there are multiple overlapping conversations going on, and it takes some intelligence to disentangle these conversations from each other. However, using contextual AI, we can spot the interaction that was the cause for this complaint. We can now look at the story behind this complaint and potentially judge the severity of it. Note that the interaction between players continues after the complaint, so this adds further context to the story. And if our swearing player apologized and did not swear again, then that story has resolved itself without the need for action, showing that you need to take into account a 360 degrees context of the entire conversation, not just the word itself. We need to move away from keyword moderation to more sophisticated tooling. But female harassment online is a real issue. It's putting thousands, potentially millions of women off playing games with chat functionality. Just last week, an article appeared in the Huffington Post written by a woman who, while playing a two-player casual game, was immediately targeted by an endless stream of inappropriate advances. She shared her story on Instagram and found that loads of her friends were having the same issue. And gaming companies need to act here, not only to stop their female players feeling violated, but also preventing them from turning off thousands of female players in their own social media communities. So we saw this in practice with one of our own clients who had no idea they actually had this problem. In fact, they came to us looking for a problem to do with fraud and bots, but we'd uncovered some other stuff that was going on. So a two-player gaming environment where men were lurking and they were waiting for women to join the game. They would greet new female players with a variety of inappropriate advances. Hi sexy, hi beautiful, in and by themselves, not necessarily words that would get flagged. And the women just exited the game. The visual shows here the impact of one man in the center, and the dots show people who left the game as a direct result of his advances. There were 720 occurrences of this one person causing customers to leave the game, probably forever. The company counted up the potential impact and estimated that he was responsible for losing about $250,000 per quarter as a result of his actions. But only by taking a look at the context could we actually attribute it back to one player rather than 720 single, different, separate occurrences. But the interesting thing here is how these men were able to be tracked and caught. And it wasn't through a keyword-led moderation tool or by human moderators. We had to use sophisticated AI and natural language processing that was working together to create these stories. With this text combination, we could see that this man was harassing women all over the place. He had history and he had form. And the powerful technology was able to uncover that. Lastly, this is relating to hate speech. And there was a recent organized movement, attempt by a supremacist group to get Happy Hanukkah classified as hate speech. But they had a very clever way of doing it. Their ambition was to actually, using the phrase repeatedly many times and at completely the wrong time of year, the objective was that Jewish recipients of these innocent messages that are normally congratulatory and happy start to complain and say that, hold on, why is somebody harassing me with this phrase, Happy Hanukkah, when it's March? Then it gets flagged by a traditional keyword moderation tool, playing into their hands and wanting to get Happy Hanukkah listed and classified as hate speech. standard moderation tools would never have been able to have tackled and solved this issue. And it's only by combating this with AI that you look at the whole context of the chat, seeing the intent and the story behind the words, identifying the time of year, that you can take the right action, prevent the wrong conclusions being made. So, in summary, this isn't just about well-being, harmony and world peace. It is also about a business reality. And it's about the bottom line, your gain KPIs, and the way in which you as community managers can engage with your players. And ultimately, its effect on your reputation, your employees, and your revenue and your future success. But, in my view, we do need to make sure that, depending on the way in which you interpret eats, shoots, and leaves, that context of these conversations is absolutely vital to understanding your community. Thank you. If you have any.
I think we have time for like 1 or 2 questions, if there are any.
Hi, I agree with all you said, and then it's a huge problem, and we need to fix it.
Yeah.
The question is, like, what you are trying to take actually is a really difficult problem to solve. It's like how you guys are actually attacking it.
How
Yes.
are we talking? Well,
Right.
I think you take it from an approach. And I think 5-10 years ago, the standard keyword moderation tools that were around, some were built by the game developers themselves for their own needs, tackled a percentage of the problem. But as I hope I've demonstrated, having just a list of words that are banned within a community that just get flagged not only can create a huge amount of workload for the community managers to look into. Swearing, for example. I mean, if you had words such as, you know, high sexy or fuck listed in your blocked words, can you imagine how many times your community managers would need to dive in to actually look at and see a situation if it was something that was effective? So AI and natural language processing look at the context, and our tech looks at how a conversation over time evolves. If we can see that there's 20 instances of 2 people swearing at each other and it's very friendly, we won't flag it. There's no point, there's no need. So I think it's about the approach. That doesn't mean that you're creating work for your communities that doesn't need to be looked into.
Can I do a, how do you guys handle the like false positive? Because like in reality, when you do the community management, the bigger problem is it's not actually banning people or like keywording or whatever. It's actually the bigger problem is caused by false positive, like you banning someone who actually didn't do wrong. So that is actually the balance that make it really, really tricky.
But that's what you learn over time. And that's where you refer back to many, many instances and not take action just on one word that's been flagged. Mm-hmm. You have to look at individual players, see if that pattern is repeating, and then you counter the false positives. And as you build up that understanding over time with your community, that's when you can take the right action. And you count out false positives, as you said.
All right. Thank you.